Welcome back to DK Ho Show. It's Monday, so we're just going to be talking about the AP Top 25 that came out yesterday. I looked at these a little bit yesterday, but not too in-depth, so I'm just going to be doing that here today. So starting off with number one, it's Georgia. They're still at 1, still 7-0. They were on a bye week last week, so I didn't expect them to change. They play Florida this week, so yeah. Moving on to number 2 is Michigan, which I don't think that they should be 2 right now, but I'll get to that in a minute. They beat Michigan State 49-0, and they have a bye week coming up. Great win for Michigan. They were expected to win by a lot. They did. But moving on to 3, and the reason why I think Michigan should be 3 and Ohio State should be 2 is Ohio State at 3 after beating Penn State, who was ranked 7th in the nation at the time. Ohio State beat them 20-12. I don't care how much you beat a bad opponent by. If you're beating a top 10 team in the nation, you should be above a team who blows out a 2-9 team or a 2-win team. I don't understand how Ohio State didn't jump Michigan at all for that, or didn't jump Michigan for that number 2 spot after that game. They played increasingly better than Michigan did against Michigan State, facing one of the best defenses in the nation and a really good offense as well from what I saw. I'm still shocked that Ohio State did not jump Michigan. But they do play Wisconsin this coming week, so that's going to be an easy win for Ohio State. So, yeah. Moving on to number 4 is Florida State. They beat Duke 38-20. Duke was 16th, in the nation. I honestly thought Duke was going to win this game, and it started off looking like Duke was going to end up winning this game, but it kind of seemed like Florida State got snapped back into the game early in that first half. They realized that they were down 17-0, and they started scoring and playing phenomenally, and I don't know what happened. It just looked like Florida State came to life after they realized, oh shit, we actually are going to lose this if we don't play. And they came out and scored 30 points and allowed, or 38 points, I should say, and only allowed 3 more points after they started to come alive. And Florida State, like I said, is 4th, and they're playing Wake Forest this coming week. Moving on to number 5 is Washington after narrowly beating Arizona State 15-7. I've been saying this a lot. I said this a lot last year. Washington is a good team. Now, you're not always going to have dominant victories over bad teams, but come on, 15-7, really? You won by 8 points. Come on now. But moving on to number 6 is Oklahoma narrowly beating UCF. They beat UCF 31-29. Granted, this was Justin Gabriel's. It was an emotional game for Justin Gabriel, the Oklahoma quarterback, after he did transfer from UCF this offseason or last offseason. So an emotional game for him. I understand him not playing tremendous, but come on now, you can't be almost losing to UCF as the number 6 team in the nation. But yeah, Oklahoma is 6th. They play Kansas next week. And the first 6 did not change. So yeah, moving on to some changes. There's some changes from here on out. Is number 7 moving up a spot, Texas, after barely beating Houston 31-24. Now, I was talking to one of my buddies who's a Texas fan, And he brought up an interesting point about Texas. They always play to their opponent's level, with bad teams at least. They always play to the opponent's level, and it screws them when they play better opponents, like we saw earlier in the year with Texas playing Oklahoma. They didn't play well, but they didn't play terribly as well. This game, they looked awful. It also didn't help that Quinn Ewers got hurt, and they had to bring up their backup. And their backup actually looked really good. So we'll see what happens with Texas, especially with, I think Quinn Ewers is missing at least a couple of weeks with a shoulder injury. So we'll see how Texas performs next week against BYU. But I expect that to be, actually, that might not be the greatest game for Texas, but we'll see. Moving on to number 8, moving up a spot. After beating Washington State 38-24 is Oregon. Oregon beat Washington State. Washington State, I haven't been saying this, but I've been noticing it a little bit. Washington State is kind of good this year. They have the ability to upset ranked teams, and they were ranked earlier this season, but they're not a team that's going to go into the playoffs and win it all. They're a team that's going to beat or basically mess up the playoffs near the end of the year. And shake things up at the end of the year. I feel like Washington State is going to be one of those teams at the end of the year playing a good team that has a potential to be in the playoffs, and they'll beat them and screw up the entire thing, and they'll have to, whoever does the college football playoffs will have to scrap their entire thing. So, yeah, that interesting game. Oregon played well, so did Washington State. But we'll see what Oregon can do against Utah, who is ranked 13th next week. Now, at number 9, moving up 2 spots, is Alabama, who beat number 17 Tennessee 34-20. Tennessee came out in this game swinging. They played tremendous to start it off, and really halftime was really the deciding factor for Alabama. Saban had to have gone to that locker room and tore them up because he did not want a repeat of last year. So Bama did move up 2 spots after that win, going into a bye week, trying to relax a little bit for Alabama. But yeah, great win by Alabama. Moving on to number 10, moving down 3 spots, is Penn State after their loss to Ohio State. It was a great game by Penn State. They played well. Their defense just couldn't hold up, and their offense couldn't do much against that Ohio State defense. Ohio State always has great defenses, and they proved it again this year that they still have a tremendous defense. And Penn State plays IU, so that'll be a easy win for Penn State. Moving on to 11, moving up a spot, is Oregon State. They didn't play anyone. They were on a bye week, and they moved up. I kind of see how looking down the schedule or down the rankings a little bit, but still, I don't really think that bye week teams should be moving up. I feel like teams should jump over them, and they should just stay the same. But nonetheless, Oregon State plays Arizona next week. So we'll see what happens in that. Next team, moving up a spot at number 12, is Ole Miss. They barely beat Auburn 28-21. I did not get to see any of this game, unfortunately. I was told it was a good game, and I kind of knew it was going to be a good game. I had Auburn winning that one. I genuinely thought Auburn was going to upset Ole Miss, especially with how they played against Georgia, played well. They almost got it done. But just like Brandon Staley and the Chargers, they just can't pull off a late game win. But nonetheless, Ole Miss did get the win, moved up a spot, play Vanderbilt next week. It should be an easy win for them. Moving on to 13th, moving up only 1 spot, which surprises me. After beating number 18 USC 34-32, is Utah. How are you only moving up a spot after beating the number 18 team in the nation. That don't make no sense. Unfortunately, didn't get to see this game, but yeah, Utah plays number 8 Oregon next week. That'll be a phenomenal game. Those games are usually good between Oregon and Utah, so we'll see what happens that week. Moving on to number 14, moving up a spot on a bye week. Talked about that with Oregon State, is Notre Dame. They play Pitt next week. Not much to say with that, considering they had a bye week. Don't think they should have jumped up, but now at 15, moving up 4 spots after beating Army 62-0, is LSU. I don't understand how you're moving up 4 spots after beating an unranked team, but I don't disagree that LSU is a top 15 team in the nation. They are phenomenal. They just have a terrible defense, and that's why they have 2 losses. If it wasn't for their defense being so bad, they would 100% they would actually be 8-0 right now. But I didn't get to see that game. I didn't really want to watch it either, but from what little I heard about it, it was a good game for LSU, and LSU did pay a lot of respects to Army after painting their end zone in camo and going over to the Army's band after the game and standing with the Army players while Army's band played. So respect to LSU for doing all that, and they're going into a bye week next week, so enjoy the time off. Moving on to 16 is Missouri, moving up 4 spots after beating South Carolina 34-12. Missouri's been good this year. I don't think they're a top 20 team in the nation, but they definitely deserve to be ranked. I also don't understand why you're moving up 4 spots after beating South Carolina, but it is what it is. They're going into a bye week. Moving on to 17 is moving down 7 spots after shockingly losing to Virginia 31-27 is North Carolina. I thought North Carolina was just going to roll over Virginia. I did not see Virginia beating North Carolina at all. That came as a shock to me. But nonetheless, North Carolina's 17th, and they play Georgia Tech next week. I feel bad for Georgia Tech because coming off of a loss like that, they're going to be looking for somebody to take all that frustration and anger out on. And I think that's going to be Georgia Tech. But moving on to 18th, moving up 3 spots after a bye week. Don't understand that, but it is what it is. Is Louisville. They play Duke next week, who's So moving on to 19, moving up 3 spots after their win over Navy, 17-6, is Air Force. Nice to see them in the top 20 or top 25, but yeah, great win against Navy. Didn't get to see any of it. They play Colorado State next week. Number 20 is moving down 4 spots after losing to Florida State 34-20, Duke. I don't agree that they should have moved down 4 spots. I think they only should have moved down 1, maybe 2 spots after that loss to the 4th best team in the nation. That is disrespectful. Don't agree with it. Not much to say on it. They do play Louisville next week. We'll definitely be watching that game. That's going to be a fun game to watch. But yeah, moving on to 21, moving down 4 spots is Tennessee. After losing to Alabama, talked about that game a little bit earlier, and they play Kentucky next week. I'm just going to move through the next 2 very, very quickly, not really talk about either of their games. But yeah, 22 is Tulane, moving up a spot, beat North Texas 35-24, play Rice next week. 23 is UCLA, moving up 2 spots, beat Stanford 42-7, play Colorado next week. Now, 24 is a little interesting. They moved down 6 spots after their loss to Utah, losing 34-32 is USC. Honestly, I kind of think that Caleb Williams, I don't know if he's doing it on purpose, but he might be dropping his draft stock just so he doesn't have to get drafted by the Bears. And I don't blame him. I don't know a single quarterback who wants to get drafted by the Bears. That is a terrible organization to be a quarterback for. But nonetheless, they dropped 6 after losing. Play Cal next week. We'll see what happens. Moving on to 25, we have a new face in the top 25. It's James Madison. They beat Marshall 20-9. They play Old Dominion next week. So nice to see James Madison in here. So yeah, we'll see what happens next week. See you next time. Peace.